Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we need to talk about a big story here of the 2023 NHL draft. And for the longest time, I've had Connor Bedard and Matvei Michkov number 1 and number 2 in my draft rankings respectively. But over this past week, we've seen a lot of conversation surrounding Matvei Michkov's contract in the KHL and the potential of Adam Fantilli instead going second overall in the 2023 NHL draft. But as it stands right now, which player is more likely to be taken in second overall, and what could we see a year ahead of time? Watch till the end for all the 2023 draft talk and all the prospect talk, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of you guys aren't subscribed, so if you like the prospect conversation, this channel is the place to be. Now, the conversation really started around this tweet from Byron Bader talking about Michkov and Fantilli in the 2023 draft, and he said this: "At the 2023 draft, I'm curious if teams pass on possible generational talent Matvei Michkov at second overall because he won't come over for a few years. Imagine if the Penguins passed on Malkin in 2004 and went with Cam Barker or Andrew Ladd instead. No cups for you." And then he says, "Fantilli projects much better than Barker and Ladd did, mind you, but Michkov has the look of an extremely rare and special talent." And this is very true though. We have had a lot of conversations, and especially a lot over this past week and these past couple of days, surrounding Michkov, surrounding the contract situation, and what a team might do at second overall. And I feel like the conversation there is pretty warranted. If a team gets second overall, I feel like it really depends on the team that gets that spot. If it's a team like Philadelphia, a team that needs to prove itself as soon as possible, a player like Michkov, who will take a few years to get to the NHL, will take probably 3 years to get to the NHL, it's gonna be a problem in that position. And that's just the thing. Matvei Michkov is 21 years old, and in the position that he's in, especially for some teams out there, I wouldn't see it as a problem. Like, let's say it's Montreal that gets that second overall spot. Let's say it's San Jose that gets that second overall spot. Teams with kind of new GMs, I feel like Michkov would be the choice there at second overall and would be a player heavily sought out for. But at the same time, I feel like for a lot of GMs out there that want to prove themselves as fast as humanly possible, they know their job might not be there in 3 years, in 3 seasons ahead of time. And I think for a lot of teams out there, there might be a situation where Michkov possibly maybe even drops outside the top 3. That could be the case, especially with how this next season goes for Michkov and him missing the World Juniors too. And looking at everything with Michkov, I personally still have him second overall, even with those contract concerns, because I'd be willing to wait, but I don't blame any GM out there that thinks that that might be too much. I mean, at 17 years old, I still think he's one of the greatest talents we'll see over this next decade. And in 2022, you see just the amount of play he was able to produce. In the KHL, played 13 games, got 5 points. In the MHL, was brilliant and mostly played with SK St. Petersburg, where in 22 games, he got 38 goals, a goal per game, and in the playoffs was a point per game as well. He'll likely be in the KHL for a pretty sizable amount of time, but again, had an injury pretty recently that'll take him out for a couple of months here. We'll put him out for the start of the World Juniors and the entire tournament, and maybe even potentially the start of the KHL season, if I believe. And that could definitely put a damper in Michkov's second overall top 2 hopes for the draft. And if that's what ends up happening, I think we could see a lot of controversy and maybe even a drop in the draft for Michkov. And the one player that has really been brought up a ton about a rival for Michkov's spot, especially at second overall, is Adam Fantilli, who I haven't really talked about as much on this channel as I probably need to. And even though he's one of the older players in this draft, he's still among the best and third in my rankings for 2023. But already is one of the most physically mature and just complete for his age. 6'3", 192 pounds from Nobleton, Ontario. And this last year in the USHL for the Chicago Steel was unbelievable. In 54 games, got 37 goals, 37 assists, 74 points, was great on that dual offense, and was pretty amazing, I thought, for Team Canada in the U18 World Juniors. He'll be with the University of Michigan this next year, and I think that's a perfect place for him to be. But that's just the thing. This player that is already physically mature, already has all these great tools, and is already developing amazingly, is going to the University of Michigan, one of the best programs, especially to stack up points. And even though they have lost lost a couple of players like Matty Beniers, Noah Power. They're still going to have players like Luke Hughes there that next year, and that's going to make his collegiate campaign and his draft campaign really interesting, especially Michkov, again, likely missing a couple of months. If he misses a sizable amount of time in Russia, and Fantilli instead is able to stack up the points, stack up the hype with the University of Michigan, which I expect to happen, there could be a pretty great case for him to go second overall, and I think a lot of teams will reconsider potentially having Fantilli outside that top 2. And even for me, if he's able to really get this season going, he could be the best prospect for a lot of people behind Connor Bedard. And with that being said, I don't even blame anybody for having Michkov not second overall. To me, there are some issues with his game and are some kind of interesting little parts of it. For me personally, I think some of the consistency and some of that work ethic physically can be a little bit of a problem, and I mean that kind of might put him away from being this absolutely generational NHL talent, maybe just a fantastic one. But I feel like those are kind of concerns that I think can be ironed out with just how special his brain is and the way he thinks the game. But again, you have probably a more complete product right now in Adam Fantilli, and maybe a more balanced offensive tool set in Adam Fantilli, and a more physical tool set in Adam Fantilli right now. And I don't blame Michkov for not being as complete. He's never going to be the player that Adam Fantilli will be, especially on the physical side of things. But I also, again, don't blame anybody for having Fantilli even ahead of Michkov right now. And by the end of the season, I could see a situation where for a lot of teams, Fantilli is over Michkov on draft boards. And again, I think we saw a great example of that kind of in the 2022 draft, where teams still value physicality so importantly in today's NHL and today's drafts. You see, of course, Slavkovsky, who was having maybe the best physical tools of the draft, rising up as the season went on and eventually being first overall to Montreal. And you see with Fantilli, 6'3", 192 pounds, and as a true centerman. I mean, you obviously have Bedard there, you have Michkov, 2 wingers, and I feel like that could kind of separate the draft a little bit. With Fantilli being a natural center, and a really, really good one, by the way, that's another part of the game where GMs and scouts might prefer Fantilli over Michkov. I mean, if your team needs a center, and I think most teams do, especially a physical one that can provide great dual threat offense, Fantilli brings that, and I think it's another factor as to why I think he's going to be top 3 in almost every single person's board by the time the season starts, and could be top 2 for a lot of people as well. I don't think he's going to really be rivaling Connor Bedard by the end of things, but I think Fantilli is going to make this draft interesting. But here I have Tankathon, and they have a lot of the teams listed and projected to be down in the dumpster in the NHL this next year. So let's go through all these teams and see which teams could maybe take Michkov, which teams could maybe take Fantilli instead. And the team that they have projected to be last place in the NHL this next year in Chicago is kind of an interesting one for me, because we obviously saw them take a player pretty similar to Fantilli a little bit recently in Kirby Dach, of course, 3rd overall in 2019, and that was an absolute failure in every single way. And considering how new Chicago is to trying to rebuild, trying to retool, I feel like they would have the patience to take on Michkov's KHL contract and wait for him to be 21, because they don't need him in 2024. They're still going to be really trying to build that prospect cupboard up, and I think for Chicago, they would end up taking Michkov. But again, it kind of depends on the year that Fantilli has. If he's around a point per game, if he has kind of like a Matty Beniers type of production to him, I could see a situation where Chicago takes the centerman instead. I personally wouldn't do it, but you consider the draft choices that Chicago's made recently. They already got Nazar, who will probably be a winger. They got Lucas Reichel, who will probably be a winger coming up in the system, and they could use a centerman, even though it's kind of along the same lines as Kirby Dach before them. But I do think they would go Michkov most of the time. Same thing I think with Arizona, but also they're in an interesting spot. They drafted, of course, 2 straight centermans, Logan Cooley, and of course, you got Connor Geeky in the 2022 draft, so maybe not, but I think it just depends on what they're looking for. They've obviously skewed a lot more towards North America these past few drafts, so I feel like they might go Fantilli, but I think just in terms of the center position, they're pretty stacked already, and I think they might look towards the winger, so I think they also go Michkov. And I think same thing as well for San Jose, especially the Sharks. They got a new GM, of course, in Mike Greer, and with his current position, trying to retool, I feel like they'll be okay waiting those 3 years for Michkov, but it also factors in the prospect pool they have. They have a ton of wingers, and that might be a situation where they do look for the centerman there, but they already got quite a few guys coming up. You could have Borderlo as a center, you could have Eklund as a center if you want, but I think the Sharks would go best player available in that situation. Montreal Montreal, I think, also goes Michkov, but they also maybe I think they could really stand to add a right winger, which Michkov will be, and I feel like you combine Slafkovsky and Michkov in 2 straight drafts, and that is an unbelievable haul. But I think Fantilli could also be maybe in the conversation. I mean, of course, they didn't go for Shane Wright, they didn't go for the centerman in the 2022 draft, so maybe they go for that instead in 2023. We will see with Montreal. Buffalo, I'm not sure is going to be around that range, not as bad, but if they were to somehow get into that top 2 spot, I feel like they would go Michkov. They do not need centermen, and they already have so many great centermen on the roster right now, combining on the fact that they've drafted Savoy, they drafted Kulich, they drafted Ostlund in this last draft, so I think they would be fine with centermen. I think they would take Michkov 100%. Anaheim is kind of an interesting situation. They already got Zegras and McTavish coming up, so I think they do go Michkov, but I mean, they did select Michkov in this last draft, so they already have some pedigree of Russian players, so I think Anaheim would go Michkov as well, and I think for Seattle, they would absolutely go Michkov. Imagine a prospect pool or a future of Beniers, Shane Wright, Yager, Matvei Michkov. That would be unbelievable. But this is where we kind of start to get into teams that I think would take Anna Fantilli. Philadelphia is absolutely one of them, in my opinion, considering the fire under the seat of Chuck Fletcher. He would take Fantilli, and also considering some of the needs center-wise for the Flyers, Fantilli would also fit quite a bit. But I think for the Flyers, they prioritize physicality, they prioritize NHL readiness, and Fantilli checks those boxes way more than Michkov does. For Winnipeg, I think they also would take Fantilli, though Michkov would be a lot of fun. I think Fantilli would absolutely be their choice, kind of the same type of thinking as Philadelphia. Vancouver would be an interesting number 2 selection. I don't think they're going to be that bad, but again, let's say they win the draft lottery. They're kind of in a weird position. I feel like they could just use all of the positions. I don't think they really would prioritize one or the other, but I do think in their current situation, they might lean towards Michkov, but it kind of depends on what their timeline is. If they want to truly compete now, then Fantilli might be a better option. But I just love the potential pairing of Pettersson and Michkov, and I just want to see that happen. Columbus, I think, would go Michkov. They've already drafted a lot of Russians over the past few years. You've got, obviously, Marchenko coming back, and they've obviously waited with him for quite a while, so they can't have that patience in the organization. And I also think the centers that they've obviously drafted, I mean, you got Kent Johnson coming up, you got Cole Sillinger coming up, you got a lot of different guys. I think on that wing, they need somebody. They need a generational goal scorer, which is what Michkov is, in my opinion, and he would fit beautifully there. Other teams like Nashville, I think they might go Michkov. They've already drafted Askarov, so they've gone for some Russians. Detroit, I think, should definitely go. Well, actually, Detroit would be interesting because I feel like Fantilli would fit quite well onto that roster, but either or definitely work. And then you got a few other teams outside of that. But honestly, I feel like it's kind of 50-50 right now, and that's even without the year that Fantilli might have. Considering everything, it's a really interesting conversation for that second overall pick, and I'll just say this: if we go on draft day and Fantilli goes second overall at the end of the day, I would not be too surprised, because that's kind of what we're kind of trending towards right now. I hope to be wrong, and I hope to see Michkov really prove some of the doubters wrong, especially throughout the course of this Russian season. But right now, Fantilli looks like a favorite to do some damage, be in that top 3, and make some noise with that second overall pick. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, hit that like button, hit that notification bell, hit that subscribe button as well if you haven't already. Comment down below, what are your thoughts on the Matvei Michkov versus Adam Fantilli debate? Who would you rather draft? Let me know with that second overall choice who you would rather choose in that spot. Let me know all your thoughts down below. Of course, share this video with all the hockey fans and all the draft fans you guys know online, and click this card for all my hockey prospects talk right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.